Welcome back to my kitchen, friends. Today we're making a classic that never goes out of style. We will be making a homemade apple pie. This pie has a very flaky crust, and not only that, but it also has a homemade apple pie filling. This filling is very flavorful. I'm going to show you step by step how to create a great flaky crust and some tips along the way. Whether you're baking for a family, friends, or just because, this pie is the perfect way to bring warmth and joy to your table. So let's get started. So we'll start by making the crust first because we'll want to put it in the refrigerator to chill while we're putting together our pie filling. So today I'll be using this cookbook. This is a cookbook I've had for a long time. In fact, it's falling apart. I've used it so much. There's a recipe in here for the crust that is so good. It's a little bit delicate, but still easy enough to use. The recipe for the apple pie filling is also in the same book. This is an older book. I had to buy it used, so I doubt that you can find it new, but maybe. So the key to getting really flaky crust is having everything cold. In fact, this time I even chilled my bowl. You don't have to do that. I typically do not do it, but I was already gathering all of my equipment and my ingredients so that I could have easier access to things. So I decided just to go ahead and throw it in the refrigerator. I have this extra large sifter. I always put a bag over it so nothing gets inside of here, so that it's always ready to use whenever I'm ready. And the reason I got this extra large size is so that whenever I'm making double or triple batches, as I often do, then I can fit more flour in here. I will be posting this recipe below. So we will be making this recipe here, the extra flaky pastry. I'm not gonna double or triple the recipe this time. I'm just gonna go with the recipe because I don't have a lot of extra time today. But typically I do at least a double batch so that way I could freeze some of the extra dough and it just saves all the mess. The first ingredient calls for 4 cups of all-purpose flour. So we'll measure out 4 cups and get them in this sifter. You wouldn't have to sift it. It's just nice if you can. Most people don't even do this step. This is something I've done for years, so I just keep doing it. When you buy your flour, it's already sifted, so I'm sure it's not necessary. Sometimes you will see a few little clumps of flour that's left in the bottom, so it's good to know that that was sifted out. So now we have 2 teaspoons of salt that we're going to put on top of this. And I'll just take my pastry cutter that I'll be using anyhow, and I'll just mix that together. This recipe calls for 1.5 cups of lard. I know not everybody has lard, but you can buy it in the store. If you want to go the healthy route, you can always buy pork leaf lard from a local farmer and then render it yourself. I know that seems like a lot of work, but that is what I do. But I just buy a lot of it whenever I do it, and then I chop it all up, I put it on the stove, I render it down, and then I pour it into mason jars with a wide mouth so it's easier to get it out of the jar. But I always put it in the freezer so it lasts a long time. And the nice thing is it's already cold. You might want to get it out early enough so that you can cut into it, because when it's frozen, it's hard. So I usually have mine out for about a half hour, and then I take a knife and cut it out that way. If you don't have lard, you can use shortening. I've never used it for this recipe, but I'm sure it would be a 1-to-1 switch. I use this type of a measuring cup whenever I'm using something that's kind of sticky to measure it out, and then it just pushes out. I actually just broke this. I'm hoping that whenever I take it apart to clean it, I can fix it again. Otherwise, I do have 2 more. So that's going to be messy. I'll just pull that off there. It normally works really good. Gotta keep things interesting, right? So we're going to cut this lard into the flour. And typically I just try to cut it up into larger pieces and get flour all over it, because once the flour is coated on it, it's not nearly as sticky. After I measured out my lard, I actually stuck it back in the fridge to help keep it cold. If I can stress anything, about this recipe or any recipe that has to do with pie crust is keep everything as cold as you can. Try to keep your hands out of the crust as much as you can. And part of the reason why you want to keep your ingredients cold during this process is to prevent the fat from melting and being absorbed by the flour. The steam from the moisture in the cold fat pushes apart these layers, leaving behind flaky, airy pockets. And that's how you get this nice flaky crust. I want to apologize too for my voice. I had an allergy situation, and it seems like every time something like that happens, thankfully it's only like 2 times a year, but I always lose my voice. If you look back in some of my earlier videos, you'll see that it's happened once before, but thankfully it's back good enough to where at least you can understand what I'm trying to say. So we're just going to keep cutting this together until we get little pebbles, like tiny little pieces of fat that are coated by the flour. You can take your fork and kind of stir it all together too at some point so that you make sure you get all the flour from the edge of the bowl. I actually think that's pretty good just like it is. So you can see there's just little pieces of lard now, and each of them little pieces is going to make a flake in the pie crust. Okay, so I have a jar of ice water here, and what I'm going to do now is take it over and take out the ice cubes and measure out just 1/4 of a cup of water. Okay, we have our 1/4 of a cup of ice water here, and then we're going to put 2 eggs in it. You want your eggs cold also. And then I'm going to take my fork and whisk that egg yolk together into the water. All right, we're just going to pour this on here. You can do it a little at a time if you want to, but it always takes the full amount. In fact, sometimes I have to get a little bit more ice water. Some people use like vodka, or they use vinegar to help keep the gluten from developing. That's something I've never done. I've not had a problem with this, but if you wanted a easier way to make pie, maybe that would be a good option to go with a recipe like that. And I am using the fork. And the reason I'm using the fork is because my hands will heat up this dough, and I don't want that to happen. It'll just melt it all together in one big glob, and then it's going to be tough, and we don't want a tough crust. All right, I am going to use my hands to see if this is going to come together or if it needs a little more water. I think I'm going to grab some more water just in case we need it. I think I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more ice water on here. A lot of this has to do with how humid your home is too. If your home is really dry, you might need more water. If it's really humid, you might need less water. Oh yeah, I think it's gonna come together now. All right, I got some wax paper here, and I'm gonna push this together enough to cut it in half. I forgot to mention that there's enough crust here to make 4 crusts, a top and a bottom for each, or you could do 4 individual crust pies. It looks a little dry right now, and that's a good thing because we don't want to add too much, because when we push this together, you'll see that it's going to come together just fine. So I just put all of my dough in here, and then I'm going to pull up the sides on this wax paper, and then I'm just going to kind of press down without overworking it. And this being half the dough, it's going to be enough for 2 pie crusts. I'll divide it up whenever I pull it out of the refrigerator. We're going to chill this, and I am going to blind bake a crust so that I can put it in the refrigerator and have it to make a coconut cream pie later this week for my husband. And you want to chill your dough for at least 20 minutes or up to 2 days as far as that goes. And if you go longer than that, you probably should put it in the freezer and then just pull it out whenever you're getting ready to use it. So we're going to get this in the refrigerator and get it chilling while we do our apple pie filling. All right, so now it's time to get these apples peeled. And what I'm using today is a gala apple. Many people use the Granny Smith apples. I'm going to be using the Gala apple. It's just an apple that I've used all the time. I love how that it is still firm enough, but yet it's a little sweeter than like the Granny Smith apples. But you can use whatever kind of apple you want. It's just that some of the apples, they kind of mush up a little bit and they're not quite as firm. I do find that these work very well. So just use the apple that you prefer in your apple pies. So I typically cut these in half, and then at that point I usually just core it. Our dogs love to eat apple cores. So if I don't use the cores for apple cider vinegar, then I'll give them to the dogs. I'm not for sure what I'll do with these ones. I do need to make apple cider vinegar pretty soon. And then I just peel the apple half, and then I just cut them into kind of thin slices, not too thin, because I don't want it to just be a mushy pie. I want to actually still have slices of apples in there. I do have one of them Pampered Chef apple peeler corer things, but not everybody has them, so I thought, oh, I'll just show how I peel them. It's not like that part's a real big deal. And when I'm just making one pie, I typically don't get the apple peel or corer out. I usually only get that out whenever I'm gonna can like applesauce or something like that. And again, I just do it kind of thin slices. You can see there it's just kind of thin, but not overly thin where it's gonna turn into mush. So I'll go ahead and get the rest of these sliced up. I'm gonna need 6 cups altogether. And it's usually around 6 apples, maybe 7. It depends on the size of the apples. All right, you guys, I'll give you some apple peelings. You want some apple peelings? They just love them, don't you? There you go. All right, now they're gonna be pestering me all the time. Yes, you will, because you're gonna think you get more. Hey, you pretty boy. Yes, you are. Now they're both laying here waiting to get more. They love the apple peelings. Okay, so they're all peeled and ready for the rest of the ingredients. I got the ingredients here to put inside of the apple pie filling. And then I'm using this recipe here, the spicy apple pie recipe. And it calls for 6 cups of sliced apples, and I already have them in there. And then it calls for 1 cup of sugar. This is organic cane sugar, that's why it's kind of a tan color. And 1/4 cup of flour. Whoa, I just made a mess. 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon of ground nutmeg, and we're gonna stir this all together. It'd probably be a good idea to actually stir them dry ingredients together before you put it over your apples, but this works too. And a bigger bowl, isn't nice? I have a different bowl that I typically use whenever I'm making apple pie. I guess I should have grabbed that. You see it looks kind of dry right now. After we let these sit for a little while we're rolling out our crust, you'll see that they start to liquefy, and it'll look a lot different than it does right now. So I'm gonna set this aside and get out our crust and start rolling that. Before we roll out our pie crust, we need to get our oven going to 400 degrees so that it will be pre-hot in time. Okay, our pie crust is chilled. Now it's time to get it rolled out here. So I'm gonna break this in half, and I'll take the bigger half and use it for the bottom. And I'm probably gonna have way too much crust here, but we'll see. So I'm just gonna press this out in kind of a disc. Okay, I'm gonna take my flour duster here and dust the counter a little bit. If you don't have one of these mats, I highly recommend them. They work so nice for biscuits, for pie crusts, for just about anything. All right. So I just kind of smooth my edges just a little bit, and I'm going to dust the top of this too. And I have a French rolling pin here, and that's what I love to use. It's my favorite rolling pin. Since I've gotten this one, I never use my other ones anymore. And you just want to keep kind of rotating it so that it doesn't stick to the counter. Just keep rotating it and trying to maintain a roundish shape. If it's a little awkward, it's not a big deal. You just want to make sure that it covers your entire pan. That's the main thing. And if you get any little tears in it, don't worry too much, because I'll show you how you can fix that once it's in the pan. Okay, I'll dust this just a little so it's not sticking to my rolling pin as I roll it up. And I have to show you this adorable pan. Take a look at that. I got that from Lehman's Hardware when we visited Ohio in May. I just think it's such a pretty pie plate. So what I'm going to do is roll this crust onto this rolling pin. And there's different ways you can do this, but we'll do it this way this time. And then I'm going to lift this up and I'll just set it over top of it. And then kind of roll it in. And you do not want to stretch your pie crust. What you want to do is take your edges and then just settle it down inside of the pan. And that hole there, we're going to fix that, so no worries. So you just want to settle it in so that it's against the pan all the way around. All right, so I grab my water, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to moisten this cut in the dough here. And the reason for that is because I'm going to put a patch on it. So I'm just moistening this. And then I'm going to take some crust from an area that has too much crust, and I'm going to wet that also a little bit. And I'm going to put that over top of that cut. I probably have way more here than I need, so I'll cut some of that back off. And just make sure it's wet enough to kind of seal that down. Because you don't want holes in your pie crust, because your filling will get up underneath your crust and make it soggy. You don't want that. So just make sure that's sealed down really good. Just like that. And if you have any other holes, right now is a good time to fill them. Okay, I have some scissors here, so if I have any weird places that are really wide or thick, I can cut them off, because we don't like it to be too thick. Some people really like a thick crust, and then probably be fine just to leave it on there then. And we are putting a top crust on here, so we for sure don't want too much extra crust. If you're blind baking, you want a little extra crust around your edge. All right, I'm gonna set that aside and clean up my mess a little bit and get that top crust ready. And again, we'll flour the surface. Kind of flatten this out on a disc. All right, let's dust the top of this a little bit. Make sure the bottom has plenty. We can start rolling it. If you feel like it's starting to stick to the bottom, you can always dust the bottom just a little bit. And of course the top. I remember when I was a little girl, my grandma, who was in a wheelchair all of my life, that's all I remember, she would make us pies and she let me help her. So I can actually say I've been making pies probably since I was about, I don't know, maybe 7, 8 years old. I was helping her make pies. It seems like it's a tradition that's kind of been lost, but maybe we can bring it back. Okay, I'm just setting this on here to make sure it's big enough for the pie, and it is. So I'll set that back over here. So I'm gonna roll this back so it's out of the way, and I'll set the pie here. Grab these apples and give them another stir. And you'll see that they're starting to moisten up a little bit. And it's much easier to stir them at this stage once they release some of their natural juices from the apple. This is such a flavorful pie filling recipe. The reason I went with it years ago was because it has extra spices, and I haven't ever veered from that because it's such a good recipe. I actually won with this pie in a pie competition, so that's kind of cool. All right, so these are ready to go inside of the pie crust. Get these in here. It already looks so good. Well, you know what I forgot? I was gonna put my little bird in here, so I'm gonna move this over. I'm gonna put my pie bird in here. So many times when I wanna do this, I forget that I have it. The idea behind it is it puts air down into that bottom crust and helps it to cook. I mostly just put it in because I think it's cute. I'm sure it has benefits, but you can get these on Amazon for around $7, I think, something like that. The one that they have the cheapest is a black color, but I've done it before to give away, and I just let them keep the bird. So, and then another thing I forgot was I forgot to emboss this. So I'm gonna see if I can roll this back out. And then I have this kind of cool little thing that you can push into it, and it makes a nice little pattern. And in reality, this could be either apples or cherries. It looks like either or. I'll set that here. And then I just take my rolling pin and kind of push it down, and it kind of cuts that pattern into it. And then I'll lift it up. And then I usually just take a sharp knife and pull out any of the little apples that didn't come out. You have to be careful though, because this is very delicate at this point. This one's not going to really matter because I have the bird in there, so you're not going to really see that too much anyhow. If you don't have one of these and you want to do a design, you can always cut in like an apple or wait till it's on the pie and do it that way. That would actually be the easiest way. A lot of times I will draw designs once it's on the pie. And you know what? If you don't get this perfect, it won't matter because you'll see that it's pretty anyhow. Another thing I forgot is to get my butter on top of the apples. So many things to remember. And this is 3 tablespoons of butter. I just pre-cut them out. And you just kind of spread it around on there. So let's see if I can do this without making a mess and without stretching that design too much. And try to get the bird over the hole. Ah, not too bad. Don't feel bad if it tries to rip on you when you do that, because you can always try to splice it together, and you know what? It's still gonna taste the same. So don't worry too much about it. I'm gonna take my scissors and cut off any of these extra wide flaps because we don't want it to be too thick. I'm gonna kind of tuck this top one under the bottom one to help seal in the edge. It just helps some of the leakage that tries to come out of the pie. So basically I'm just rolling this top down under the bottom one, and we'll just keep going all the way around the pie, rolling that top down under the bottom. If you come to a spot where you don't have enough crust, you can always grab some of your scraps and you can kind of hide it up under there to give you a little extra crust to work with. It looks like I have plenty. All right, I'm gonna kind of pinch this up just a little bit. It'll make a nicer finished edge. You don't have to do that. So I'm gonna take my knuckle and my finger and put it like this, and then I'll take my other knuckle and put it in here to kind of make an indent shape like that. So basically it's like this. So I just take my knuckle and my finger, push. You can just use the end of your finger as well, but with fingernails it makes it a little bit more of a challenge. And you just keep going all the way around. And if you're a perfectionist, you can always come back and kind of straighten these up if they get angled off to the wrong direction or whatever. All right, there we go. At this point, if you want, you can do an egg wash over the top of it. I typically don't do that with this. So I'm just gonna get it right in the oven. So I put parchment paper down and put it on a pan, and then I'm gonna get that in the oven. And this way, if anything drips, it will drip onto that paper. Actually, I gotta move my rack down. I think I'll move it down about halfway. Just be careful your pie don't slide off on the slippery sheet. And there we go. Set our timer for 40 minutes and come back here and check it then. Okay, I heard the timer go off. Let's give this a look and see. Oh boy, it looks so good. Look at there. That looks so good. So I'll set it on a trivet and let it sit for, probably at least a half hour before we cut into it. Well, I'm hoping that this pie is cool enough because I am ready to give it a try. It's so pretty, I kind of hate to cut into it. I can already see the flaky layers. I don't know if this is cool enough. That looks so good. I think I need some vanilla ice cream on here. I know you can't smell it, but this smells amazing and it looks good too. I can't wait to try it. Okay, it's time to give this a try. That is so good. The crust is so flaky. I wish I might be able to show you. See how flaky that crust is? All right, I'm gonna try one more bite and then I'll hand it off to my husband to finish. Well, that pie was so good. It's so worth the time and effort it took to make it. Thank you for spending time with me today in the kitchen. I hope that this apple pie inspires you to slow down, bake from scratch, and enjoy the little things that make your house feel like home. Thank you so much for spending time today with me in the kitchen. I hope that somehow it inspired you to give this a try. This recipe is so good, and it's been one of my standbys for years. So if you enjoy videos like this, please consider subscribing and join me here again next time for more homemaking inspiration. I hope that you all have a wonderful day. Bye for now.